and welcome to Swayam MOOC on British Poetry and Drama. I'm your host Dr. Vandana Rajoriya and I'm very happy to have you all here with me today. In our previous session, we took a detailed discussion, line by line analysis of John Donne's very celebrated love poem, The Sun Rising. In today's session, we will dive deeper into the thematic concerns of the poem, the garb of the poem and the entire philosophical debate which it arises, and we'll try to arrive at an understanding of what is a metaphysical conceit and how and why Donne's poem is known as metaphysical in nature and how it inspires a whole line of poets known as metaphysical poets. So, before we continue with the discussions, let us look back at the analysis of the poem we had done in our previous session. Let us live back the most important lines of the poem which are crucial to our discussions today. Donne begins with rebuking the sun. He says, "Busy old fool, unruly sun." And what happens? In line 1 to 4, lover rebukes the sun for interrupting the blissful experience of love, and this rebuke transforms itself into a philosophical turn, a metaphysical strike where love and time are at war with each other. Then line number 5 to 8, he questions sun's authority over lovers, and by questioning sun's authority, he challenges the idea that cosmic governs everything, and he somehow says that it is the individual made one in love that governs everything. Then Donne moves further to assert that lovers are beyond time. Kings, rulers are beyond time. Why? Love grants mastery, not submission. Then in the next lines, lines 17 to 20, he goes about to inverse the idea of wealth, idea of power, idea of luxury, where he says all, wealth, alchemy. And when he is saying this, he is basically making a philosophical proposition that truly wealthy or true wealth is love and not what the world considers to be valuable. Then towards the end of the poem, he completely reverses the universal order, and his bed and his love becomes the center of the universe, the new axis around which the whole world revolves. Now, when you look at the sun rising, it very powerfully comes out as a poem which establishes sovereignty of love as an emotion over all other human endeavor, and somehow Donne very beautifully forces us to consider what is truly valuable, what is it that we as human beings should long for, should aspire for, or should try to preserve in time. In vain, entire human effort is directed against wealth, against gaining immortality. Donne's world was a world where scientific inventions and discoveries had started unfolding. Science gradually had started proving the previous thoughts about human being, about nature of life wrong, and gradually Donne's world was changing into a world where people start worshipping new order, new science. So when Donne here challenges the cosmic order, Donne is not alien to or separate from the world in which he lived. In fact, this is the time when so many new inventions and discoveries are proving so many of human ideas about the nature of life and existence wrong, that Donne takes the power to force us to see that it is not only the physical assertions where we have gone wrong, but it is the assumptions about truly lasting, truly valuable, truly powerful that we as human beings again have gone wrong. So Donne uses many devices and figures of speech to exercise the power which he claims here. So first and foremost, Donne very powerfully uses what can be understood as metaphysical conceits in it. So he uses metaphysical inversion here, changing the word order, and he uses metaphysical strike, where a very popular belief that all life on earth is slave to time, slave to sun, that way, slave to time. Donne's poem get their unique power from his metaphysical conceits. Now, how would you understand a metaphysical conceit? Metaphysical conceit is just like simile, but you could understand it as a far-fetched simile. So, what does John Donne do? He yokes together heterogeneously dissimilar ideas and compares them, and the result comes out to us as a metaphysical conceit. So, two completely dissimilar things. For example, in the next poem which we will be taking up, Donne compares lovers to a pair of compass. In our poem, see, whole cosmic order is compared to individual personal order. Donne's poem get their unique power from the metaphysical conceits which we saw how he uses in this poem by metaphysical strike and by metaphysical inversion. But apart from this, Donne's poem are having deep philosophical motifs woven into it. So, any poem, or for that matter any form of literature, it gains power from themes, motifs and symbols. Writers use themes, motifs and symbols to exercise their influence, to drive home their ideas, and it is ideas which are at the center of all their thought, all their endeavor. So, let us try and understand what are themes, motifs and symbols. Themes could be understood as the fundamental philosophical concerns embedded in the poem. Motifs you can understand as recurring structures or patterns that weave meaning across the text. Now, symbols can be understood as objects or figures charged with abstract significance. So, when you try to look at themes, motifs and symbols, basically you need to understand, you need to dive deeper and ask some questions. Questions like, how does language generate an idea? Or where do images repeat and why? Or what transforms a curtain or bed into a worldview? So, when you find the answer to the question, how does language generate idea? The answer would be in the form of themes of the poem. When you see the things which are repeatedly coming and creating a unique impact, they are used as motif. When you meditate upon and find answer to the question, what transforms a curtain or a bed into the center of the universe, you basically are looking at the symbols of the poem. And Donne's poem derive their power from themes, motifs and symbols. What begins as insult to sun, when Donne says, busy old fool, unruly sun, and ends in triumph of love, where he succeeds in making the bed new axis of this world, lies the idea that love is supreme, love is sovereign. So when he says, she's all states and all princess I, what he is asserting and highlighting is that true power rests in love, and the power which you see in royalty, the power which you see in kingship, it is basically false. So, first and very powerful thematic concern of the poem comes out as love as supreme. Second thematic concern is basically the real cosmic order. So, what is it that the speaker in Donne, or for that matter Donne, proposes? That all the order which you see outside, it is false, it is a pretense, it is a performance. The only order which is true, the only order which is real is the order of love. So, here you can understand it that Donne is somehow highlighting the artificial nature of the world, false show of the world, and he is highlighting the truth which lies in true love and the power which true love gets by this authority, by this idea. So, somehow through this poem, Donne revolts against the cosmic order, against the artificial nature of our existence. So, we as human beings, we keep striving for things artificial, and somehow Donne attacks it, attacks this human way of looking at life. Then another thematic concern of the poem is the private world as the true world. So, what is it that he says? This bed thy center is, these walls thy sphere. So, Donne doesn't personalize the experience of love, rather he recenters the whole world around it. After thematic concerns, we next move to the motives, because the poem gets its power from the motives used also. So, motives are basically recurring ideas or images which generate a particular feeling, emotion, or establish a particular thought. So, what are the motives which you find in Sun Rising? Look at the poem, and in the very beginning, what is it that you find? Busy old fool, unruly sun, why dost thou thus through windows and curtains? Yes. So, the first property, first thing which comes out as a motif in the poem is the windows, and curtains. Appearing in line 3, these are more than household items. Windows and curtains here become liminal images, thresholds between public and private, sun and the soul. So, when Donne says, through windows and through curtains call on us, the intrusion of sunlight becomes the intrusion of duty, time and reality. And what Donne highlights is that the love is not a slave to duty, time or the external reality of the world. The next motif in the poem is the seasons, the celestial language. So, words like motions, seasons and hours, which echo throughout the poem, they are reminders of mechanical time. So, seasonal or celestial language is used here as a reminder of mechanical time, which Donne disrupts with passion. So, love here becomes unseasoned, thereby above time, out of time, beyond time. Next, Donne uses political metaphors as motifs. So, when he says states, princes, honor and kings, basically all these words are not decorative words used just for the power which they have. They basically are motive used to elevate the status of the lover. So, in rejecting worldly titles, in rejecting worldly honors, Donne magnifies emotional truth as a new form of power. Now, after windows and curtains, seasonal and celestial language, political metaphor, the last motif or final motif which the poem uses, which Donne uses in it, is the idea of microcosm. Now, Donne invokes a Renaissance worldview where man is the miniature universe. And when he says, shine here to us and thou art everywhere, then the lovers are no longer in the world. Rather, the world exists through them. After themes and motifs, we now move to symbols. Now, how would you understand symbols? Symbols are basically figurative anchors of a poem. Let us look at the symbols in this poem to understand this idea better. So, what is the most powerful symbol used in this poem? Yes, you've guessed it right. Sun. Busy old fool, unruly sun. So, sun, the divine clock, the orderer of time, the establisher of cosmic order. And Donne uses this traditional symbol of divine order, divine presence, and by calling sun busy old fool, reverses it. He uses sun to gain control of the situation, and by insulting sun, by reprimanding sun, Donne uses language to rob sun of his majesty, turning it into an official, clerk-like person, interrupting divine communion. The next symbol which the poem uses is bed. Here it is not just a location, it is cosmos, it is a sanctuary. By the final stanza of the poem, bed becomes axis of all reality of this world. So, what begins as a lover's space becomes a metaphysical center. Curtains and windows are not only used as motifs, but they are also used as symbols in this poem. So, what is it that they signify? As symbols, curtains here signify division between inner world and outer world, inside and outside. Donne uses them to set the lover's world apart from the outside world in an effort to assert and reassert the dominion of love. The final symbol which Donne uses is that of sphere. In Renaissance cosmology, sphere was a geometric container of the heavens. So, when Donne says, this wall thy sphere, it is a radical remapping. Donne is trying to relocate cosmic structure, cosmic outer world within inner private space. So, it is no longer the sun that defies the world, but it is the lover's gaze. So, in totality, when you look at these themes, motifs and symbols, you realize that by using them very powerfully, Donne gains a unique control in this poem, and a simple moment, a simple event of intrusion of light into the blissful life of the lovers, it transforms into a magical, cosmic, philosophical debate about what is truly valuable, what is truly powerful. Through our discussions of the poem, The Sun Rising, in the first section of the lecture, we took up a detailed line-by-line analysis of the poem via close reading. And today, when we took up a detailed discussion of themes, motifs and symbols in the poem, what comes out evidently is, how powerful poet Donne is. Our reading of Sun Rising establishes Donne as a very powerful poet, as an innovator. So, very first line establishes Donne as the writer of a new cosmic order when he says, busy old fool, unruly sun. So, Donne here comes out as a cosmic challenger. Then, when he weaves beautifully the metaphysical conceits into the poem, we see Donne as the creator of the metaphysical conceits, and then when in his vision Donne describes love as eternal and crowns as fleeting, and describes lovers as not bound by time, he basically becomes a poet of sovereign love. Finally, we find Donne as a literary revolutionary in the poem. Now, Donne's poetry is a battlefield where feeling and intellect wrestle and embrace. Now, this entire discussion could sound like a, riddle, and the exercise of making meaning here could sound like a, exercise of solving riddle. But dear students, remember one thing, a poem is a moment preserved in eternity, and it is when you look at the poem like this, you would be able to come to terms with the, deep metaphysical conceits, the powerful philosophical thoughts which the poem brings about in the simple event, simple occasion. And let us make it a bit easier to remember the ideas, to assimilate them deeply. We can use a mnemonic, Sung, S-U-N-J. So, what happens in sun rising? First mnemonic is S. So, sun is challenged here. Donne opens by confronting sun, not praising it, and therefore he demonstrates courage that is required to reorder cosmic power. Then the next word is U, universe. And what is it that happens here? Universe is remade. The bedroom becomes the center of the cosmos. The private becomes the universal. N now becomes eternal. A single morning becomes timeless. So, intense feelings of love suspend the motion of time and clock. Then J, God-like love rules all. Love replaces the sun as the highest authority. Emotional truth becomes cosmic law. Now, why is it important? Because Donne teaches us that poetry can bend time, space and structure. To witness Donne is to witness a brilliant mind at work, to witness a serious poet and philosopher reflecting upon what is truly valuable in an age where everybody is running after power, everybody is running after titles, money. Donne, and remember our discussion of Donne and his life, who has faced so much, struggled so much, has sacrificed so much for love. Somehow, it is to see the rise of a great poet of love as a great sage of love. Now, this is here we'll wind up our discussions of John Donne's Sun Rising. Through the two lectures, we took up a line-by-line analysis of the poem. We looked at the metaphysical inversion, metaphysical conceits at work in it. We took up a detailed study of themes, motives and symbols of the poem, and we, by a mnemonic, tried to understand how we can actually remember all that is truly, worth remembering to understand the poem better. This is all for today, but Donne's magic doesn't stop here. So, tomorrow when we meet, we'll be taking up a discussion of another poem of Donne, which is even more magical, even more powerful. The poem, A Valediction Forbidding Mourning, where lovers rise from the bed to become a pair of compass. How? Let us explore tomorrow. This is all for today. Thank you.